The summer heat pressed down on the city. David Grant, a wealthy businessman and single father, was only trying to get his son to school. Until he stopped to help a young woman stranded with a broken-down car. And her past followed them both into the schoolyard. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. The sun was already punishing the city streets, heat rising off the asphalt in waves, when David Grant steered his black SUV toward Roosevelt Elementary. His 10-year-old son Noah sat in the back, humming along to a pop song, tapping on the window like it was a drum set. David glanced at him in the mirror, lips twitching into the faintest smile. Mornings like this were his anchor, the only time the world slowed down before business calls, meetings, and deals clawed at him. Traffic snarled 2 blocks from the school. Cars honked in frustration, and David muttered under his breath. That's when he saw her. A young woman stood beside an old sedan stalled in the middle lane, hood popped, steam curling into the heavy summer air. Drivers swerved around her, some shouting, others ignoring her entirely. She looked small against the chaos, a white blouse clinging to her in the heat, brown hair sticking to her forehead. Without thinking, David pulled over. "Noah, sit tight," he said, already stepping out. The woman's eyes darted to him, wary but desperate. "It just died, I don't know what." David rolled up his sleeves, leaned under the hood, and in minutes coaxed the car back to life. The woman's relief poured out in a shaky laugh. "I don't even know how to thank you." "Just get it to the shop before it quits again," David replied. She offered her name, but the bell at Roosevelt Elementary rang, and Noah's voice called out impatiently. David waved it off, hurried back into his SUV, and drove away, not realizing this wasn't goodbye. Because in just a few days, he'd hear that same voice again, but this time, it would be in his son's classroom. The gym at Roosevelt Elementary buzzed with restless kids and fanning parents. David sat stiffly in the back row, tugging at his collar. He hated these events, all small talk and forced smiles, but Noah had begged him to come. On stage, the principal droned through introductions, and David's mind drifted to the stack of contracts waiting at his office. Then a name cut through the noise. "Please welcome our new 5th grade teacher, Ms. Emily Carter." David looked up, and nearly lost his composure. The woman from the stalled sedan stepped into the spotlight, her hair pinned neatly, her blouse pressed, but he knew those eyes. He remembered the way they'd flickered with relief when he'd restarted her car. Emily's voice carried steady, but when she scanned the crowd and met David's gaze, she faltered. "Just for a second." Noah leaned close. "That's my teacher, Dad." "She's nice," said Learnings and Adventure. David forced a smile, but his chest tightened. Claire, his late wife, used to say the same thing. Learnings and Adventure. After the assembly, Emily crossed the gym, stopping short when she reached him. "Mr. Grant. I didn't expect to see you here." "You and me both," David said lightly. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her knuckles whitened on the folder in her hands. Before David could ask, her gaze darted past his shoulder. A man stood in the doorway, a tailored suit clinging to his frame, eyes fixed on her. The air between them felt like a live wire. Emily's face drained of color. David turned back to her. "Friend of yours?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. She just shook her head quickly and excused herself, clutching the folder like a lifeline. David watched her go, unease pressing in. Whoever that man was, Emily Carter wasn't just a new teacher. She was a woman running from something. The following week, David pulled into the school lot a little earlier than usual. His schedule was always packed, but something about Emily Carter lingered in his mind. Not just because of the way she'd looked at him in the gym, startled, almost guilty, but because of the man who'd been watching her. That same man was there again. Leaning against a black sedan at the edge of the lot, arms folded, eyes locked on the classroom wing. He wasn't hiding. He wanted to be seen. David walked Noah inside, his hand steady on his son's shoulder. When they passed Emily in the hall, she gave Noah a warm smile, but her glance toward David was quick, almost pleading, as if begging him not to make a scene. Later, as David headed back to his SUV, he caught the man's stare. It was the kind of look he knew well, the cold calculation of someone who thought they owned the room. He'd seen it across polished boardroom tables, men who smiled while sharpening knives under the surface. Only this wasn't about business. This was personal. That evening, while Noah sprawled on the floor sketching superheroes, David poured himself a drink and stared at the city skyline. His wife Claire used to say teachers carried more weight than most people ever noticed. They hold our children's trust in their hands, she'd told him once. Now here was Emily, a teacher with shadows behind her eyes and a stranger tailing her steps. David had promised himself after Claire's death he wouldn't get tangled in anyone else's battles. He'd keep life simple, raise Noah, run his business, survive. But as the city lights blinked below, one thought dug in deeper than the guilt. What if Emily Carter couldn't fight this alone? Friday afternoon baked the city streets in heat. David was running late, Noah's backpack half-zipped as he bounced on the school steps. Ms. Carter said she'd wait with me, he explained. David's eyes swept the lot, and froze. Near the brick wall, Emily stood cornered. The suited man leaned in close, his voice low and sharp. She clutched her satchel like a shield, her posture rigid but trembling. David's pulse tightened. I told you, Mark, Emily's voice cracked but didn't break. You can't keep showing up like this. Mark smirked, brushing her arm. You think hiding behind a chalkboard makes you free? You're still mine. Don't forget who signs the judge's golf checks. David didn't think. He moved. Is there a problem here? His voice carried the weight of a man used to commanding rooms full of executives, and shutting down anyone foolish enough to test him. Mark turned, eyes narrowing. Stay out of this. It's between us. No, David said, stepping between them, his tone like steel. She said it isn't your business anymore. That means it's over. Emily's breath hitched, relief and fear tangled in her expression. Mark sneered. Big shot Grant. I know your name. You've built your empire on shaky ground. Don't tempt me to prove how easily it crumbles. He slipped into his sedan, the engine growling as he sped off, leaving the smell of burned rubber in the air. Emily's knees weakened. David steadied her arm. You okay? She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. That was my ex-husband. He doesn't, let go. David looked toward the disappearing car, his jaw set. He'd fought cutthroat men in boardrooms, but this was different. This wasn't about profit. This was about power. And now it was his fight too. The cafe was nearly empty, the hum of an old ceiling fan the only sound between them. David stirred his coffee once, then set the spoon down. You should tell me the truth, Emily. If I'm already in this, I need to know what I'm up against. She looked small in the booth across from him, her blouse rumpled, fingers tightening around a chipped mug. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, Mark Carter. Attorney. He's connected to judges, councilmen, business owners. He knows how to twist the system so it works only for him. David leaned forward. And you? Her voice trembled. I tried to leave quietly. I filed for divorce, thought it was done. But he couldn't stand losing control. He said if I ever fought him, he'd take Lily from me. That's my daughter. She's 7. He already filed motions once, false claims about my mental health. I barely kept custody. David's stomach tightened. He'd lost Claire to illness, and the thought of someone threatening to tear a child from their mother made his blood run hot. You can't fight him alone, David said. Emily's eyes met his, wide, desperate. I can't fight him at all. If I push, he'll use his connections. He'll drag me through court until I'm broke. He'll make me look like I'm unfit. Silence stretched. David could hear the rain starting outside, heavy drops against the glass. Emily, he said finally, men like him only win if good people back down. Her lips trembled. And what happens when he goes after you, David? What happens when he decides to take Noah the way he threatens to take Lily? The question landed like a stone in his chest. He thought of Noah's drawings taped to the fridge, of Claire's journals still tucked in his desk. For the first time in years, David felt something burn hotter than grief. Resolve. David had built his life on control, on knowing every risk before it landed on his desk. But this was different. Emily's fear clung to him like smoke, and the thought of Mark's threats replayed in his head long after he dropped Noah off at school. That morning, he made a call. Torres, David said, leaning against the window of his office, the skyline shimmering in the summer heat. I need you. Not for business. Something personal. The retired detective grunted on the other end. You don't usually do personal, Grant. I'm not asking for favors, David said. I'm asking for eyes on a man who won't stop until he destroys someone who doesn't deserve it. Torres didn't press. Send me his name. By afternoon, David felt a small measure of relief. Until his assistant walked in pale-faced, holding a stack of papers. City inspectors shut down the Grant Tower project. Safety violations. David snatched the notice. False claims, every one. Still, the damage was done, headlines already questioned his reckless expansion. Investors were calling. Mark was striking back. That evening, David picked up Noah from school and caught sight of Emily on the steps, her daughter Lily clutching her hand. Emily forced a smile when their eyes met, but David noticed the tightness in her shoulders. Dad, Noah said as they walked, Miss Carter makes math fun. But sometimes she looks sad when she thinks no one's watching. David's throat tightened. Out of the mouths of children came the truths adults tried to bury. Later, as Noah slept, David opened Claire's old journal. One line, written in her neat hand, stared back at him. The real measure of a man is what he protects when no one's clapping. David closed the book slowly. He had made his choice. Mark didn't waste time. Within a week, David's world began to shift under his feet. A smear article hit the business pages, Grant Empire built on debt and deception. Stockholders panicked, calls flooded in. Then came a knock on his door, CPS investigators asking questions about Emily, about her daughter. Anonymous complaints of neglect. David didn't need proof to know who was behind it. Mark was tightening the noose. That night, Torres came by his office, dropping a file onto David's desk. He's dirtier than I thought. Kickbacks, shell companies, payoffs to judges. And here, he tapped a page, a familiar name. David froze. Claire. His late wife's signature, buried in old city grant paperwork, her notes on misallocated funds. She had been digging into corruption in the education system before she fell ill. Your wife was onto something, Torres said. And Carter was right there in the mix. The room felt colder, though the summer heat still pressed against the glass. Claire's memory had been a soft place in David's heart, untouchable, sacred. Now it twisted into something sharper. Had she known? Had her silence been fear? He stared at the papers, pulse heavy in his ears. Emily's voice echoed from earlier, he'll drag me through court until I'm broke. He'll take Lily if I resist. David clenched his fists. This wasn't just Emily's battle anymore. Mark Carter had been poisoning lives for years, including Claire's. And David Grant wasn't going to let that stand. David spread the files across his desk, city lights glowing in the window behind him. Receipts, contracts, whispers of backroom deals, Torres had laid out a roadmap straight to Mark Carter's corruption. It was enough to bring him down. But when Emily saw the papers, her face went pale. "If you use this," she said, voice breaking, "he'll come after Lily harder than ever. He'll say I planted it. He'll twist it until I look like the villain." David leaned forward, his jaw set. "Emily, he's been doing this for years. To you, to Claire," his throat tightened at the name, "to the city itself. The longer he walks free, the more people he hurts." She shook her head, tears threatening. "You don't understand. He doesn't lose. He'll bury me in court. He'll use his friends in City Hall, and one day I'll wake up to find my daughter gone. I can survive a lot, David, but not that." Her words pierced deeper than he expected. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the same fear he'd once felt watching Claire fade away, powerless to stop it. "Emily," he said softly, "he already controls you. Every time you stay silent, he wins." She looked away, her hands trembling as she gathered the papers, then shoved them back toward him. "Then don't do it for me. If you fight him, do it because you can live with the cost. I can't." David stood there long after she left, staring at the damning evidence. For years he'd built his empire on profit margins and contracts. But here, in the quiet of his office, he realized this wasn't about business anymore. It was about legacy. What kind of man would Noah believe him to be if he turned his back now? The press conference wasn't in his calendar. David called it himself, against the advice of his board, his lawyers, and even Torres. By noon the next day, reporters packed the plaza in front of City Hall, microphones bristling like spears. David stood at the podium, sweat prickling under his suit in the summer heat. But his voice carried steady. "My name is David Grant," he began. "For years I've built businesses in this city. But today, I'm speaking as a father, and as a man who can no longer stay silent. Corruption has poisoned our courts, our schools, our neighborhoods. And at the center of it is attorney Mark Carter. I have the proof, and today, so does the public." He held up the documents Torres had uncovered, the cameras flashing like lightning. At the edge of the crowd, Emily clutched Lily's hand. Noah stood beside her, wide-eyed, pride glowing in his small frame. David's gaze caught theirs, and that was the only strength he needed. By evening, the headlines blared, "Business mogul accuses powerful attorney of corruption." Mark struck back the very next morning. David left his building only to find Mark waiting by his car, calm, composed, smiling as if nothing had changed. "You think headlines matter?" Mark's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "I still own the men in those courtrooms. I still have friends who answer my calls before yours. You might win applause, Grant, but you'll lose everything else." He leaned closer, dropping his voice low. "You have a son. I have resources. Do the math." For the first time, David felt his blood run cold. Mark wasn't bluffing. And worse, Noah had overheard every word. Noah stood frozen on the sidewalk, eyes wide, the echo of Mark's threat hanging in the humid air. David crouched down, resting both hands on his son's shoulders. "You listen to me," David said firmly. "Men like him win when we're scared. But I won't let him scare us. Not you. Not Emily. Not anyone." Noah swallowed hard, then gave a small nod. That night, David met with Torres again, handing over every scrap of evidence. This time, it didn't just go to the papers, it went to the state attorney's office. Judges, councilmen, contractors. Mark's whole web started to unravel. By the end of summer, indictments were rolling out. Mark's allies began to turn on him. The man who had strutted through courtrooms now looked cornered, desperate. And Emily, for the first time in years, walked her daughter to school without glancing over her shoulder. Still, the cost had been real. David's company weathered weeks of uncertainty, investors furious that he had tied himself to a scandal. But slowly, the tide shifted. Clients respected a man willing to put integrity above profit. What he lost in money, he gained in trust. One evening, David and Emily sat on the bleachers after Noah's baseball game. Lily and Noah chased fireflies across the outfield, laughter floating on the warm breeze. "You didn't just save me," Emily whispered. "You gave me my life back." David looked at her, the ache of Claire's memory softening into something steadier. "No. We saved each other." As the kids ran back, Emily's hand brushed his, tentative, but certain. That night, Noah taped a drawing to the fridge, 4 figures under a blazing sun, holding hands. And David realized the truth. He hadn't just shown his son how to fight for what's right. He had given them all a second chance at family. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.